Welcome back. This is CSC220 Intro to Cyber. We are reviewing some of the primary concepts and methods that this module will introduce. Basically, in our last session, we talked about the difference between events and incidents and how there are contingencies. One of the things that we want you to understand is that there are too many cases where it is legal to do or not do a thing, yet very unethical to do or not do the same thing. And one of life's ironies is that you should not complicate a basic understanding of what is right and wrong in cyber. But that does happen. One simple way of understanding it is that if it's illegal, if what you're doing online is illegal, or with a computer, if it's illegal to do a thing in real life, then it would be illegal to do it with a computer. This is called the law of the horse. So if you steal a horse in real life, that's illegal. If you steal something using a computer, that's just as illegal, okay? It's really important to understand the trade-offs. Now, in the comfort of your own home, there may be some things that are not safe for work, but are okay to do in your own home, depending on what's authorized or not authorized in your own home. But there are some ethical standards that we want to spend some time reviewing, okay? So in our computer ethics slide series, on slide 37, it talks about the things that you shall not do and should do, right? So in this module, we want to take some time to make sure that what we understand to be good or bad is clear for everyone. So what I'd like to do without further ado, can everyone see the screen here?
Yeah.
So there are 8 thou shalt nots, right? If you're working ethically, and by the way, you do have an assignment that's related to ethics, right? Ethical use. So when we talk about signing and submitting the ethical use document, it's good that everybody's on the same page about what we mean by what's ethical, right? So as you take a look at this document, says, I agree to use all forensic resources in an ethical and legal manner. So that's why we're spending the time to go over this list. This is a set of standards that are commonly understood by cybersecurity professionals. So we will not use a computer to harm other people. Are there any questions or comments about this particular standard, this ethical standard?
No.
Okay. So what if we used a computer to dox someone? Is that harmful? Does everybody know what the term dox means?
Isn't that basically like putting specifically their address on the internet for others to see?
Right. Let's say that we used our computer to say that there was a home invasion at this address and that people had to come now. And you put that information out there, right? Is it possible that people in the home could get hurt or even killed because law enforcement respond to a situation believing that someone is under duress and that there are armed criminals inside the house?
Yeah.
It's actually happened. People have actually died from that, right? So what turned out to be a prank for a network game. There were network gamers that were ticked off with each other. We found out where they lived, and they called the law enforcement. The law enforcement showed up with a SWAT team, and somebody came out on the porch and didn't understand what was going on and didn't respond with their hands up and their fingers interlaced and laying flat on the porch as quickly as they needed to. And a twitchy trigger finger ended up costing someone their lives, right? True story. Absolutely true story. Interfere with computer work engaged by others. That's the second case. Snoop around in the data or computer resources owned or used by others, right? So that gets to be kind of a gray area. If you're on your home network and something seems suspicious, you got to be able to have an honest conversation about, okay, I've identified it's this device or this whatever. I need to investigate that, right? So snooping around is the problem. Investigating it isn't. You don't want to use a computer to steal. You don't want to use a computer to bear false witness, to lie about something, to copy or use proprietary software or intellectual property for which you have not paid, right? Music and movies, that's a big one. True story. I was involved with a young man who started a rock group. He started a music career, and they started a rock band in their garage. But before then, he liked to bootleg music, and he got caught as a student at a university campus. So they told him to knock it off, and he had a real hard time with it. He said, look, music companies rip people off. I'm just doing what everybody else does. So one day he got a big break with his rock group, and he's actually featured as the soundtrack, in the soundtrack, several of the cuts in the soundtrack for a famous movie, right? Cameron. The director's name is James Cameron, and it's Elizabethtown. So essentially, it was their big moment. And they went to a recording studio for the record company to record those soundtracks that were used in the movie. Now, in order for them to get paid, they had to satisfy the cost of the sound engineer and the music, the recording studio, right? Guess what happened when the movie was released? True story. People copied it and distributed their music on the internet free. So how many people actually bought their music? Very few. So they were not able to satisfy the cost. They never made anything. It was very, very heartbreaking. But I'm sharing this with you from personal experience. This is a true story, right? Any comments, observations, questions at this point? I'm sorry, it was Cameron Crowe was the director, I believe. The name of the movie was Elizabethtown.
This might sound mean, but honestly, that kind of just sounds like karma.
It does. It does sound like karma. Another year, not too long after that, when the student was called out by the Dean of Student Affairs at the campus and told to quit copying and sharing music, right? The FBI came into the town and they arrested 37 households where people were sharing bootleg music. They had identified the recording industry had embedded stuff in the music, and they were able to locate where people were sharing. It was peer-to-peer network sharing, right? 37 people got hauled off by the FBI in Columbia, South Carolina one year.
But wait, isn't it unethical to put tracking things in your files though?
It absolutely is. So what happened is that there was a boomerang. Law enforcement found out that when they were putting tracking software on the CDs, that it was actually something that had happened where they had colluded together. There was a conspiracy, and there were multiple recording studios that were involved. Sony was one of the biggest ones. Sony got sued for a huge amount of money. I want to say over $1 billion, because they embedded tracking software on the computer systems of people with the sole intent of finding who was taking their music. Now, you can legally copy to digital format the track that's on a CD. It's called ripping a CD, right? So there, as long as you paid for the CD and bought the CD, it's okay to do that, right? But this is probably one of the largest cases of unethical behavior with computers, is that people are out there just taking stuff. They get free copies of textbooks. They get free copies of music and movies. And thinking that that's going to be okay really isn't. Another true story. The first year I was here on campus, we had students using our research network, which was staged outside the normal campus network. And one of our students used it to download something really nasty, unsavory, right? Adult content. We were sent an email from the publisher of that adult content who said, hey, you owe us royalties. And we had to deal with that with the ITS department at UVI. So anyway, I'm just saying that's one of those things that, you know, when you talk about ethics, right? Some things people think are okay in the privacy of their own home, but if they're crossing boundaries, that's when it gets to be difficult. All right, so any comments, observations, questions about this? Use the data or computer resources owned by others without permission or compensation. Has anyone ever heard of the SETI project? SETI?
No.
No. Did you know that there's an organization that's devoted to the search for extraterrestrial life?
Yeah.
It's called the SETI Institute. And did you know that you can install software? So some of these organizations devised software, right, that you could download, and guess what it did while it was running on your laptop or your computer? It shared the data or computer resources, so it ran in the background. It was one of the programs that ran in the background in the task manager, and it ran on purpose. So they told people, hey, if you want to help us search for extraterrestrial life, you can help us analyze the digital noise that we're picking up in our telescopes. And so people installed software that took up resources on their computer, and they did it willingly. That's not illegal. But there are others. Did you know? Have you heard of Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you know there have been schemes with malware where your computer is enslaved and it runs hot and it runs hard and it uses your electricity? And what is it doing? It's creating Bitcoin for someone else. And there are thousands of infected systems, and somebody's making a huge amount of money because they're using your electricity and your CPU cycles to generate their Bitcoin. True story. Yeah, it's been done.
Bitcoin mining?
Yeah, Bitcoin mining, but they do it surreptitiously or clandestinely, and they do it under the guise of something else. So sometimes when people are infecting your system, it's not to steal your data, and it's not to get into your Kool-Aid and read about your secrets. Sometimes all they're doing is taking up data on your hard drive and using your computer resources without your knowledge. So they can yoke 1,000 machines and control them remotely to generate massive amounts of Bitcoins, right? People have actually been caught doing this, and they've been jailed doing this. So this last one, the appropriate the intellectual output of others without proper attribution and compensation. This is a copyright violation. the Millennial Digital Copyright Act, DMCA, right? Digital Millennial Copyright Act, DMCA, is a law that's actually a US federal law, and it makes it a felony, right? So when you watch a streaming movie at the beginning and there's an FBI logo and it says, this is not a victimless crime, 5 years in jail and $250,000 per offense, that's what they're talking about, okay? Now, let's talk about the thou shalts, okay? Think about the social consequences of the program you create or the system you design. Sometimes we have issues where people are using artificial intelligence to convince a population of folks to do something, or to convince a population of viewers to believe inaccurate information. This is unethical. There have been cases where people have created AI systems to brainwash huge segments of the population before elections. It's already been done, right? So you want to think about the social consequences of the program. In fact, the name of the company that did this right before one of our elections was called Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica basically infected a lot of screens in the UK. And right before the British citizens voted to participate in the European Union or to break out of the European Union, something called Brexit, Cambridge Analytica used artificial intelligence and digital systems to sway people with misinformation. Then Cambridge Analytica, so this is an article that's written in 2018. So this is 2 years after the fact, right? In 2016, Cambridge Analytica started to do things for the US election where Donald Trump won office over the competition. And what was discovered after the fact is that some foreign interests paid Cambridge Analytica to saturate American media with that information. True story, right? How much did they influence the election? Well, they started long before the election, and they started saturating American media with misinformation. Cambridge Analytica no longer operates. They were shut down, in case you weren't aware. Always use a computer in ways that ensure consideration and respect for others. Oftentimes, it's easier to talk about the things we should do with a computer instead of the things we should not. Psychologists have determined that if you have ethical standards or rules, if you have laws that say, don't do this, you can't do that, no speeding, no stealing, every time you see not or no, there's something about the human condition that kind of tempts some personalities to actually try it to see what they can do to get away with it. It's much better to state a law or a rule in a general, open, and positive way. Use a computer in ways that ensure consideration and respect for others. That's a blanket statement that covers almost anyone. But in your assignments, we asked you to consider some things in the scenario with some videos that had to do with hacking situations, yeah? Some of you have actually taken some time to look at this. Those of you that have not, I have extended the deadline through 11:59 p.m. tomorrow. Everyone in the class needs to finish this assignment and this assignment, right? In any case, there is a common link that's embedded in the video scenarios and in the hacking attack that occurred with South Carolina State University, okay? And when you look at our ethical standards, one of the things that pops up all the time is this idea of impersonation, pretending to be someone or something you're not. This is one of the most common unethical practices that hackers use constantly. And when you think about it, they're trying to pretend to be your bank. So you want to check, oh, there's a problem with your bank account. Or there's a link that says, hey, you should check out this new game. And it's not a legitimate game, but they're taking advantage of a new popular game, and the link redirects you somewhere else. Whenever you have redirection or impersonation, that is one of the things that is unethical and in many cases unlawful, right? Now, here's a case where it isn't, and I want to spend some quality time on our solution. So what I'd like to do now is to pivot. If you look at this, avoid any use of technology that harms others, disrupts their work, violates their privacy or property, is deceptive or dishonest, inconsiderate or disrespectful, that could diminish the greater good. Let's take a look at our solution scenario, right? Can everybody still see the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in our situation, right, when you read what's going on about something fishy, what we're going to do is talk about a case with incident handling that comes up often, right? So one of the things that we said was that just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you should. In the workplace, there's a software application suite. It's an entire suite of products called EnCase, and it's used for forensics, digital forensics of all types, including network forensics. And in the workplace, they often embed it inside here. Employers have something that are called that they work with their employees on in their education, awareness, and training, called an acceptable use policy. Does everybody remember the term AUP, or acceptable use policy? Has anyone ever seen the banner that pops up when you log into a University of the Virgin Islands computer system? It says, hey, if you're using this system, you agree to we monitor, right? You should use this for academic purposes. We monitor. Have you ever seen the banner when you log into a university system?
Yeah.
All right. Let's pretend that the IT department, the information technology, the ITS department has a computer, and the user is nowhere to be found, but the computer is going nuts. And it's causing problems on the network. Is it ethical in some cases for a technology department to change the password of a user if it's clear the user has broken the terms of the acceptable use policy? If it's clear that a user is up to something no good, and it's clear that all the users in a network sign off and they say, yes, we understand you're going to monitor our networks. Yes, we understand you're going to do that to keep our network safe and our computer systems secure. So everybody's already agreed that, you know, a company can do this, right? Let's pretend that we have a disgruntled employee and the signs are clear that they're up to no good. Is it acceptable if the organization has done what it must to inform and educate their employees? Do they have the right to investigate what's going on the employee system? In most cases, what would you think?
I would say, yeah.
Yes, especially if it's clear that something is up up to no good. Something or someone is up to no good. Now, it's different if there's no indication. Has anyone ever heard of the term probable cause?
Yeah.
Probable cause, right? So law enforcement can't just take over your data. They can't violate your privacy. They cannot confiscate your property or your documents, right? They can't do that kind of thing unless there is probable cause. In the same manner, when incident handlers are trying to keep a network secure, if all of the employees have been educated and trained properly, and they all agree and have signed off and said, I understand, I agree with these standards, and then something weird happens. Let's say somebody's on a leave of absence, they're having a baby, or somebody's out, and yet their computer is still active, even though they're on a leave of absence. That is probable cause to assess the system further, right? So the question is, can you inspect everything all the time just because you can? Is it okay that you do? And in simple terms, we want to be able to assert just because you can doesn't mean you should. That said, there are cases where you need to be able to dig in, okay? So when you're an incident handler, you have to be able to collect information. Now, do you know whether or not the user is intentionally doing a thing or not?
I think yes. Like if there's certain patterns that you're picking up, then maybe.
That's correct. If there's a locked or running system and there's a need to make an administrative change to the logon password that would allow you to access the live screens, you could do so, but you wouldn't just want anyone to do it. You would want to be professional about it, and you would need to ensure that such detail would include a log of acquisition and analysis and appropriate validation. Approval. The short term is approval. You would need a record of approval, and then you could change the login password. Now, let's say that somebody really is nasty and they're disgruntled and they mean harm to the organization. Would you want to do anything to tip off your hand when you're investigating?
No.
No, you wouldn't. So what you would need is like a help desk manager to change the login password, and then you'd get access to live screens. And would you do anything to the live screens to change the live screens so when that person gets back on their system, all of a sudden they've been tipped off? Does that make sense? I mean, it's kind of a cat and mouse game. There are cases when this happens. What I'm going to share with you now is that that's the very scenario we're going to portray in our solution. When you read each of these references and then you look at the incident response, what I want to call out right now are these extra requirements, right? I want you to watch this video first about using Chrome Remote Desktop. So what we've done is we've created an online system, and the online system is going to stand in place of an actual office machine. The office machine of Sydney Corinth, who works at AFES. And it becomes obvious that something weird is going on. And what you need to do, right, after you read the assignment, you need to read all of this thoroughly. And then I want you to notice this document here. Each of you are going to take your turn getting on that system. You're going to pretend that I am your IT manager, and you are supporting the IT staff as an incident handler, and you're requesting of the supervisor that there is access to the machine. Now we're going to simulate physical access by using the Chrome browser. We're going to simulate that you get the key to go in the office to unlock the machine. The machine's name is Banshee. Okay? Does everyone understand what's going on? Sydney Corinth has a machine in the building, the corporate building of the AAFES headquarters. Something is very badly wrong. Sydney went rogue. Sydney can't be found. Read the breakout of the situation. You're going to find out that something is fishy. And does everybody see how I've spelled fishy here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a type of cyber attack, right? Phishing, spelled with a PH. So this is intentional, right? When you start reading this situation, we want you to stand in place of an incident handler who is a digital evidence forensic specialist, somebody that's a first responder. And we want you to pretend that when you're working through this web browser, you're actually walking into the office and getting your hands on the keyboard and the mouse. Okay? Now, in order for that to work, we have 8 students. What would happen if one of you was on that screen doing things when another person, another student, goes in there to take a look at the system? What do you suppose would happen? It would end badly. You'd be clicking and moving stuff, and the other student would be moving things. So can everybody see this here?
Yeah.
Okay, what I want you to do is to pick a primary and an alternate day and time, and I want you to send me email, and I want you to tell me which day and which time. Your first choice and your second choice. Then I'm going to update this here in Blackboard. And why am I updating it? As people start to sign up, there's going to be a version 1 that's released. It'll show which days and times are blocked off. Then a version 2, then a version 3, until everyone in class has claimed their own special day and time. Now, here's the catch. When you get on this system and you're checking to see what's happening with Sydney Corinth's messed up machine, and by the way, that machine is running like a what? A Banshee. The CPU cycles are off the charts. The hard disk activity is crazy. The amount of network traffic is bonkers, right? What you're going to do is get on there as if you had physical access. So we are simulating what we would call phase 1 of incident handling, which is actually physical response, except that we don't want you to report to one of the campuses or the others and then actually work on it. So that's why we're doing it across the network, right? And here's the other thing. You want to leave the system exactly as you found it. There are certain things you can do and certain things you cannot do. After each person takes their turn observing the system that belongs to Sydney Corinth, what you are doing is capturing artifacts of the live activity as if you were sitting at the keyboard and the mouse, right? Now let's pretend that one of you comes in here Saturday at 12 noon and another student says, I want Saturday at 4 p.m. What I'm going to do after the student is finished for an hour, each of you have 60 minutes, and that's it. You have 60 minutes. We're going to pretend that Sydney Corinth is away for lunch. Sydney Corinth is out for lunch. The help desk manager is going to change the password so you can get on the screen and you can collect evidence about what's happening on that live system. Sydney is logged on. In order for you to gain access to a locked system, you have to have the password. Password will be temporarily changed, and you will be granted a record of approval to stand in place of Sydney to capture the physical evidence. When you use the web browser to remote in a remote desktop context, it's as if you could stand in front of a real screen, use a smartphone or a digital camera, and take pictures with a digital camera. But one thing you have to be sure of, you have to put the windows and the tabs and the screens and everything back the way it was. If I go in there at 1 o'clock after a student gets on there from 12 noon to 1, and I find out it's not exactly the same, then what do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to give you a call. I'm going to call you in person. You and I are going to have a chat, a heart to heart, and I'm going to flunk you. I'm going to fail. I'm going to fail you. It's not funny, but basically what people will do is they'll log out. Do the windows of a system stay open if the user logs out? Would that change anything if we had a bunch of windows open and running in Banshee, and then you finished looking at all of them and you captured the details, the artifacts that you need for phase 1, the physical artifact, the evidence gathering, right? So you're a digital evidence forensic specialist. What would happen if you logged out as Sydney Corinth because you had his or her temporary password? Here's what would happen. I hope this will show on screen. If I try to sign out right now, what do you think happens when I try to sign out? I should get a screen that says, hey, these applications are still running. Are you sure you want to sign out, right? Do you want to close these applications? You can't sign out, you have to lock the screen. So what we're saying is there's a couple of things you want to do, and what I want you to be aware of is that I'm going to go in behind you. And if I find out that you screwed it all up, I'm going to tag you in, I'm going to zero out your score, and I'm going to say, try again. Why did you log out? When you logged out, you changed everything. So you're going to use the Chrome browser in order to get ready for this solution. I have a video with a walkthrough of what you have to do and how you have to do it. But one thing you're going to need to do is install Chrome as a browser. If you don't have it installed already, you'll want to update it. And then I'm going to give you a specific login and a password. If you display this graphic image, I don't want to do it right now, but when you click on this, it'll show how you get onto the system as if you were standing there in person using a Chrome remote desktop with the Chrome browser. And then when you're finished, you're going to lock the computer. You will not sign out, because if you lock the computer and all the screens and tabs and windows are just the way you found them, then we're good. Because when Sydney Corinth returns to the office and gets back on that screen, Sydney Corinth will have no idea whatsoever. What will happen is that Sydney Corinth won't be able to unlock. Sydney Corinth is going to try to unlock, and Sydney Corinth is going to find out something's wrong with my password. And when Sydney Corinth calls the help desk manager the supervisor is going to be waiting. And the supervisor is going to say, I'm sorry, Sydney, we had some technical issues with our system, and out of an abundance of caution, we've changed some passwords. I'll go ahead and give you a temporary password, and then we need you to put a new password in your system. Do you understand, Sydney? And what's Sydney going to do? Sydney's going to shrug and say, well, okay, I understand. And Sydney's going to get a temporary password from the IT help desk the technology manager who authorized you to do what? Check up on Sydney. Now, what's going on with that crazy machine? Does everybody understand what we're saying here?
Yeah.
It's actually a pretty cool thing. Now, last year and actually every season, somebody screws up. They watch part of this video and they don't take their time sending a second and separate email. Because when you do that, I'm going to remind people, right? And you want to avoid signing out. You want to lock the screen when you're done. So you're going to get reminders along the way. Now, if you make an honest mistake, here's how you save your credit for the effort. You send me a 911 text message, you go, oh, you know, it was just a reflex. I signed out instead of locking the screen. I didn't mean to. If you tell me that and you send a 911 to this cell phone number, I will get on the system. I will restore exactly how that system looked when Sydney quit messing with it and went to lunch, so that every screen, every tab, every window is in exactly the same place. And I will not zero out your credit. But when I go in after every one of you is finished with your observations on Banshee, if I find out that you screwed it all up and I do not have a 911 text message from you or a call to this personal phone number where you say, you know what, it was an honest mistake, it was just a reflex, that's when I'm going to flip this and I'm going to send you a 911 text message. And I'm going to be the one that calls you and says, hey, there were 3 other people that were supposed to follow you this afternoon, and you screwed it all up for everybody. And not only that, Sydney Corinth is out, gone to the wind. They're gone they're gone with the wind, right? Sydney Corinth is on the lam. Sydney Corinth knows that we're on to Sydney Corinth. And now we're having a big problem because Sydney Corinth is deleting data. Sydney Corinth is stealing information. Sydney Corinth is altering and doing all sorts of stuff to our systems, right? That's the reality. So it's what we want to do is kind of create a simulated situation here. And I'm going to play it to the hilt. So I want everybody to understand we're role playing here. I don't want you to freak out and think you're going to flunk the course. That's not the case. But you may have to do the access over again in order to finish the solution to keep your credit. Now, I know that's a bit much to take in, but does anyone have any observations, comments, questions, concerns at this point?
On average, how long would you say the solution would take?
You can observe everything that's open and active. When you watch the YouTube video, I walk through it step by step and I explain everything step by step that you can do and everything you should avoid. If you watch the YouTube video first and then go into the screen, I've seen students finish in as little as 20 minutes. And then I've also seen students take 2 hours and I'm like, what the hell are you doing? And then I get on there and it's a train wreck. I have to restore the system. I have to rebuild the system from a backup because it's that ruined. So if you do the stuff on the front side, I'd say 20, 30 minutes. If you rushed and you had to watch the YouTube and a day or two later you're doing it, it might take you 45 minutes. You can easily do it in less than an hour. And every student is signing up for a 2-hour block. So if it runs over, I'm not going to chop you off at the knees. If it takes an hour and 15 minutes or an hour and 20 minutes, if you have to step out or something, that's fine. Does that answer your question? And I'm glad you asked it, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Just remember, you want to be honest. That's the ethical thing to do, yeah? You don't want to be the one student that's like a typhoid Mary that screwed up the remote system. And all of the students that come after you are like, Kentop, there's nothing on the screen. I've had people call me up at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon and they're like, I'm in here, but there's nothing on the screen. I'm like, what? because it's a virtual system, I can dial it back and see what happened when. So it's actually pretty important, to be honest about it. I'd rather hear it from you up front than for me to track you down and go, everybody was good until you logged in. Maybe we should go over this together. Every year, somebody screws it up. Last year, in particular, the first person that went screwed it up. And 3 more people after that submitted the wrong information because the windows were closed. And they were all signed up for back-to-back sessions, and there was no room. I mean, basically, people took longer than they were supposed to. And then when they finally cleared the screen, the next person was ready to log in. In one case, 2 people were signed on at the same time, and one was moving the mouse and the keyboard while the other one was freaking out. Yeah, that happened. It's pretty funny and not funny. Any other questions? Okay. Well, you'll have a link to watch the step-by-step, and then after that, have at it. Tell me what day and time you want to do this. Once again, the virtual access is like me giving you the physical keys to go into Sydney Corn's office. And you need to cover yourself by getting documentation of approval to access the live system. That's what ethical people do in a tech department. That's what incident handlers do. They get an approval to go in there because, well, it's bad and they got to check it out, but they don't want to just go in there on their own and start plugging away on someone else's machine. They don't want to destroy evidence, right? Okay. So that's all we have for today. I hope you enjoy the weekend. Please finish up 3.1 and 3.2 before you start looking at the references and the YouTubes for 3.3. If you can remember to finish your reconciliation, right? Finish your reconciliation for the second module so that you can complete the retake. So you can complete the retake while the trail is fresh. And I hope you stay safe and dry this weekend with Tropical Storm Tammy. Thanks for joining us.